Hi, I'm Alex from Mesa Lifestyle, and today we're going to be working on the Donna Cardigan from Fibre. Let me put a picture up. Love it. It is a knitted pattern. The pattern does say that if you want to use a woven fabric, you can. You just have to make sure that you use rib knit fabric for the cuffs and also for, so let me tell you about the pieces you're going to need. You're going to need piece number 1, and this is the front, and you're going to need 2. Then you're also going to need piece number 2. And this is the back, and you're gonna cut piece number 2 on the fold. There's your fold line. You're also going to need piece number 3, and these are the sleeves. You're gonna cut 2, and don't forget to mark those notches right there. That's your notch for the front, and then your notch for the back. Make sure that you have those in. You're also going to need piece number 4, and these are your plackets, and you're going to need 2, and you need to interface both of these, so don't forget to do that. You're also going to need piece number 5, and this is your neckband. You're going to need to cut 4 of these pieces, and then 2 of these you will have to interface. You also need piece number 6, and piece number 6 is cut on the fold, and you're going to have to do 2 of these, and 1 of these you have to interface, so don't forget to do that. You're also going to need piece number 5, and these are your cuffs. You're going to need 2. And then last but not least, you are going to need piece number 8. And this is your hemband, and you're going to cut 1 on the fold. All right, don't forget to go ahead and cut your fabric, mark your notches, make sure that you interface, and let's get ready to sew. All right, first thing first, the pattern is asking us to grab piece number 3, and this is the sleeve, and then piece number 1, and this is your front, and go ahead and mark those. You have notches. There's mine right there, and it's asking you to go ahead and pin. Right, there's my notch right there. And we're working with knitted fabrics, so when you're working with knits, you really want to use a long zigzag stitch. I use a lightning bolt stitch. And this pattern calls for 3/8 seam allowance, also known as 1 centimeter. So go ahead and take this to your sewing machine and stitch 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. And then once you do that, it is asking you to go ahead and serge in your overlocker or in your sewing machine. You can also use your serger for all of this and not have to do this on my sewing machine. I just love doing it on my sewing machine, just I have a little bit more control over that than my serger. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this in, and then I'll go ahead and serge. So go ahead and do that. Attach your front to your sleeve, which is piece number 1 to piece number 3. Make sure that you're paying attention to these notches, especially on your sleeves. You want to make sure that you are attaching that to the single notch. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so I have my sewing machine on a lightning bolt, and the lightning bolt looks like that, right? And again, 3/8 or 1 centimeter, and go ahead and stitch. So I went ahead and stitched my front to my sleeve, and I went ahead and serged it, okay? And I also, the pattern's asking you to go ahead and press your seam allowance towards the sleeve. Now, I want you to grab pattern piece number 2. Pattern piece number 2 is your back. And then the pattern is asking you that with right sides together. Again, find your notches. Again, and I'm attaching this to my sleeve. Go ahead and pin. And I want you to go ahead and do the same thing. I want you to stitch 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter. I want you to go ahead and serge your seam allowance. And then I want you to go ahead and press your seam allowance towards the sleeve. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my back to my sleeve right there, and I serged, and I also pressed my seam towards my sleeve. Now I want you to do that for your other side, right? So I want you to go ahead and same thing that we did. I want you to attach your sleeve on this side and then your front. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and attached my other side of my front to my sleeve and my back, right? And now the pattern is asking you to go ahead and make sure that you fold on that sleeve and that you pin. And I always like to start by the underarm. And if you ever have issues with my seams never match, the trick to that is for you to press those seams after you do you serge or you sew. Okay, so super important that you do. So go ahead and pin your sleeve, and same thing. Once you pin all of this, you're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter, and you are going to serge. Okay, and now this is, and I always try to do this when I'm doing sew alongs, guys. This is that time of when you have your pattern that you can kind of test for fit, right? And based on the measurements, the sleeves on this might be a little long. Again, it's a cardigan, so I may just want this to be a little bit more loose. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch the sides, see how I feel about the sleeves, see how I feel about the length, see how I feel about the length of the cardigan. It might be a little longer based on the instructions, but that's something that I can adjust. So go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and stitch your underarm seam and the sides and serge. Go ahead and do that now. I went ahead and stitched my underarm seam and serge, and of course, like I mentioned, I'm gonna let the camera pan out. You really want to make sure that you are pressing. I know it is a knit, but those are the little things that make a huge difference in your garment when you're making things. All right, so now that you have your bodice done, I want you to put that off to the side, and I want you to grab piece number 8, and this is your hemband. And I want you to go ahead and fold wrong sides together, and you have a notch right in the center. And if you didn't, that's a good spot to put one. Just kind of fold it onto itself. All right, so we're gonna grab our bodice and we're gonna do this right sides, or yeah, right sides together. So we have that notch there for the center. This is my center right there. So you want to attach right there. Now, usually the next part I want to do is attach my end. Okay. And if you see, your hemband is going to be shorter than your bodice, right? So what you want to do is you want to slightly stretch your hemband when you are sewing this. Okay. So if you're like, oh my God, what's going on, right? That's why when you are stitching, you want to stretch that so it meets your whole length, kind of like it's going to stretch around your body. You can always stretch it a little when you are pinning, so you know when you're in the sewing machine that you know, hey, this is going to be roughly about here. And remember, you are stretching the hemband. You're not stretching your bodice, right? So you're stretching again your hemband. So go ahead and pin all of this. And you are, once you're done pinning, you're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch, seam allowance, take it to your sewing machine, and again, you're going to slightly stretch on your hemband. Don't stretch that much. You want to stretch just as much so the two lengths meet, all right? See that right there? So again, I'm stretching the hemband so it meets the length of my bodice. Right, so I am stitching my hemband to my bodice, right? And I have a little bit extra again. I just want to pull on the fabric ever so slightly to meet the length of the hemband. Okay. So again, I'm just pulling on it a little bit. So I went ahead and did my hemband. I serged, and I also pressed my seam allowance towards the bodice. And now I'm going to go a little bit on a different direction from the directions. So I'm going to do my sleeve cuffs. So you see these sleeves are pretty big. So I want you to go ahead and do 2 rows of gathering stitches, and that just means that you are going to leave the ends of your starting stitch long, and you're going to use the longest running stitch on your machine, which mine is 5mm, and then you're not going to back stitch at the start and at the end. I want you to do 2 rows of gathering stitches on both sleeves so we can go ahead and attach the cuff. Go ahead and do that now. All right, 2 rows of gathering stitch on gathering stitches, straight stitch. My longest running stitch is 5mm, right? And don't worry about these stitches. You can easily pull these later on. So again, leave your tails long. Do 2 rows. I did those 2 rows of gathering stitches. All right, now I also want you to grab piece number 7, and these are your sleeve cuffs, and you have a notch right there. I want you to fold right sides together. I want you to go ahead and pin, right? And then I want you to stitch 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, or 3/8 or 1 centimeter, and it's going to look like this. And usually, since we are going to turn this over, I usually like to cut a little bit on the center just when I am folding that doesn't feel so bulky, right? Ooh. So I usually like to do that. And then I just fold the cuff. You can always press these seams open, but once I cut that down the center it did, and it just gives you a nice finish, right? You don't have all that bulk there at the end. So I want you to go ahead and grab your pins, and you really want to make sure that you're pinning that center one. Okay, so center. And you also want to match those notches, and that is your center. Okay, and I usually like to put like 2 more pins, so it just gives me, right, the center seam, the opposing seam, right? So I like to put 4 pins. I know they're all equal distance, okay? So now I want you to grab your cuff, and I want you to pull on those threads. Okay. For some reason that one won't cooperate. Let's see. There we go. And just go ahead and pull on these gathers. You want to make sure that your gathers are even, so right now I want you to grab your cuff, and you see this seam, you see that seam, I want you to match it. So this is both right sides together. Again, you have that center seam, right, from your sleeve. And then you also had that notch over there on your sleeve. Match it with that center notch for your cuff, right? And you should be able to tell if, okay, I need to pull more on my gathers. You just want to match those gathers to the length of the cuff. So again, if you need to pull more in your gathers like I do there, now's your chance. Okay? If you want to add more pins, you can always do that, which I might. Now that you have that all pinned away, I want you to go ahead and stitch 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter all the way around. And once you're done with that, I want you to go ahead and serge your seam allowance. And I want you to do this for both cuffs. Go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and pinned my placket, and you should notice that you should have a little bit at the end. That is so we can finish the placket inside, right, and attach it. So I am going to go a little bit different from the pattern just because I want to get this done, okay? And we can stitch in the ditch later on. So I want you to grab that bottom piece, and I want you to stitch 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch across, okay? And again, that's right sides together at the bottom of the placket. Go ahead and do that now. So I stitch my placket, okay? And again, I want to cut that little piece right there, okay? Turn it, poke that out, and just so you finish that right there. And now I want you to go ahead and pin. All right, so go ahead and stitch 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. Then go ahead and serge and then press your seam towards the bodice. Go ahead and do that now for both plackets. I went ahead and attached my placket. I serged it and I pressed the seam towards the bodice, and now I'm going to go ahead and do a little top stitching on the right side, and I'm just going to top stitch on the edge, probably about 1/4 of an inch or 6 to 8 millimeters away from this edge, just so I can tack down that seam allowance. All right, so go ahead and do that now. So I went ahead and top stitch on that hemband just so my seam allowance doesn't move. And pretty much you can also do it the way the pattern requires you to. It just means that the seam allowance that I tacked down, pretty much you would have folded it onto the hemband, or not the hemband, but the placket, right? And then you would have stitched in the ditch in that seam allowance. Usually, yes, we can do it that way and it just looks cleaner inside. Remember, this is a muslin for me. And when I do anything that requires stitch in the ditch, I usually like to hand sew it just to make sure that it looks nice, clean, and straight. And I'm not going to do that with this. So I want you to put this off to the side. So we're almost done. So I want you to grab piece 5 and 6, and these are your facings, and you should have 2 pieces for piece number 6, and that's your back facing, and then you should have 4 pieces for pattern piece number 5, and these are kind of like your front side facings. So I want you to pin those, and I want you to stitch 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch, and I want you to do that for both sets. So you're gonna have 4 of these front ones and 2 of these. So go ahead and do that now. So I got my facings done, okay? And then I also, one of the 2, you should have 2 of these. I went ahead and serged or overlocked the edges, okay? So now I grab my bodice, and let me kind of show you, right? I went ahead and pinned it. So right sides together, and you have a notch right there, okay? I'm gonna show you how I pinned it. And you're gonna have that notch, and it's going to extend 3/8 or 1 centimeter from the edge, okay? So go ahead and pin all of that, okay? So kind of, let me adjust this so you can kind of almost see it. See how it's pinned? Again, so right sides together. So that means that this really long edge, you're going to be pinning this way, right? This way, all the way around. So go ahead and pin your facing and mark that notch right there. See that notch? It should go in the middle of your placket. That's when you know it's correct. So I go ahead and pin and stitch 1 centimeter all the way around. Go ahead and do that now.
I attached my neckband, okay? And this is how it looks from the inside. I press that seam allowance towards the neckband, okay? Now you want to grab your other pattern piece and pin. Right? So pin all the way around.
And I want you to go ahead and stitch again. Put a pin right there. So I want you to stitch, and I want you to start right 1 centimeter, pivot, stop your needle right there, pivot, and go 1 centimeter or 3/8 all the way around until you get to the other corner. Then stop your needle, pivot, and then come down. All right? So I want you to go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and stitch your facing to the neckband that we just attached. So we clipped our corners. You turned it. Okay? Now, this is the one part I didn't want to do for my plackets, but I do want to do it for my neckband because it's going to be in my neckline and my collar, right in the back of my neck. And if you've ever had one of those pesky like labels from ready to wear, it is like so incredibly annoying to have that fabric there. So I want you to fold that seam allowance, okay? You grab your pins, and then you want to pin right through, pull this loose thread. You want to pin right through that seam, and you want to make sure that you are catching right? That you are catching that back there. So go ahead and do that all the way around. And guys, this is where I usually kind of even grab my needle and thread, nobody kill me. And I kind of attach these facings just so they look really nice in the inside, okay? Coincidentally, if you just want to put your seam allowance towards that, right? Just put your seam allowance and just pin and stitch. You're just gonna have that seam allowance showing versus, right? Just folding it onto itself and make sure that it's catching on this side. So you can do that by hand or on your machine. I probably will do it by hand. Nobody kill me. It's just the little things that I like to do by hand, right? The placket, I don't care so much about that. But if it's by my neckline or the back of my neck, yes, I know that is going to bother me. So once you are done, and I'll do a small video on stitch in the ditch. All right, so I wanted to explain stitch in the ditch if you've never stitched in the ditch, and today is your day. So I am stitching, trying to get as close as possible. I'm stitching right on that seam, right? And what it's doing, I'm catching the facing from the back. So I would definitely say take your time while you're doing this and make sure that you are catching the facing on the back. You have your buttons. So go ahead and measure and do your buttons, and you are all done. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. As always, I will link the pattern and fabric on my blog. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Till next time, bye.